the outset of his teaching on prayer, Jesus has emphasized the quality of our relationship with God. I think that many people know this fact, but overlook it in practice. For many, God is the eternal strategist, playing some form of chess match with an opponent whom some say is Satan and others merely some anonymous opponent. People then are the various pieces. The famous are the powerful pieces, the bishops, the knights, the queens. The remainder of us are sacrificial pawns. We may say that God is interested in us individually. However, our behavior and our attitudes belie the belief that we are merely here to serve a purpose in the pursuit of some cosmic victory in God's game. This has led so many people to batter their complex little minds into shape, attempting to determine God's next move for them and what service they should be performing. This concept finds no footing in Jesus' prayer. Nowhere in the Lord's Prayer can we find a place where Jesus says, "Teach us this day what service we are supposed to perform, what evangelistic work we are to do, what mission we are to go on." However, these too often are the questions that we ask ourselves and others. Someone goes to church, and as soon as they indicate that their desire is to grow deeper with God, they are questioned about what ministry they may like to perform. It is not that such questions are not important. They are. It is rather that such questions are secondary and not of the first concern. The first question to be asked is, how is your inner relationship with God? Frequently I'm asked how one begins in spiritual direction. What does one actually do? In psychotherapy, a person approaches the work usually with a problem or something troubling enough to compel them to enter the work. Spiritual direction is different. There is often no problem. The approach to beginning spiritual formation is to ponder the question, who is God to me? This is what Jesus proposes when he teaches that prayer starts with the intimate relationship between you and God, continues with the fullness of the life to be attained, and the manner of sustaining that offered life. Once the grounding of life with God is established, then answers to questions of service and outer activities merely present themselves, as does the answer to determining the will of God. Service and activity merely flow peacefully from our God-grounded hearts, now moving into community. The postmodern world is a culprit in developing a domineering technological attitude, which even now the Church has adopted by osmosis. This postmodern world asks different questions and has a different focus than does the divine. The world proposes questions framed by what and how. God asks who. In our modern and postmodern emphasis on external achievement, the question of who you are is lost in the development of what you are, what you do, and how you do it. We have been overcome by a technological mentality that is destroying the individual. Even though we consciously value this technological mentality, our souls know the danger, a danger that has taken on mythic proportions. Merely witness the fascination with such films as The Matrix, Terminator, and Star Wars. Each of these films is an obvious statement of technology usurping one's humanity and the fight to regain our humanity. In a more covert manner, it is also the theme of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. It is well known that Tolkien was no advocate of the mechanized life, seeing it as destroying humanity, something he witnessed firsthand in the fields of the First World War. His orcs are the deformed products of such technology, elves ruined by this evil. Technology is developed and run by the what and the how. Purposes, goals, and methods are its way. When a technological mindset dominates, then the value of life is defined by questions of what a person is, what a person does, and the discovery of how to attain goals. The manner Jesus talks about life and the way that he teaches to pray say that this is not his interest at all. He is much more interested in the who of a person. Who are you? Who is God? Who is each of these other people around you? Who are you with God and with others? These are the questions that matter. Not what have you done for God, nor what have you done for others and they for you. What questions inhibit relationships? Who questions build them? It's an odd thing that in a society that appears so individualistic, even narcissistic, that we have lost ourselves. In a society that has developed such wonderful means of mass communication, mobile phones, the internet, and the like, relationships have diminished. I would think that being able to call you at any time, see your video presence on the internet while talking, being able to get information in a flash, that I would be more related to you and others. But the fact is that we have only the appearance of relationship. The depth is gone. We have devolved into the clipped sentences of Twitter, the monologues of Facebook, and the soundbite of the media. Depth of the who has been sacrificed in favor of the shallow waters of the what and how. It may not be so surprising to realize that as the uniformity of the machine dominates our postmodern world, that there is a growing level of narcissism. The psychologist will be able to see the reason for this, for narcissism is not really about the true, deep self. It is not about who I am. It is about what I am. As the society about us values what I am, the value of the who I am diminishes. And this is the heart of the narcissistic experience. If we recall the metaphor of the ocean and the fish, the ocean being our true self, and the fish the ego. What we understand is that narcissism is the activity of the fish closing its eyes to all that is around it and being completely self-contained. We often use the word narcissism in a very broad manner, frequently merely meaning selfish, or self-absorbed, or just self-centered. It is useful to see narcissism on a broader spectrum, where at one end is that merely selfishly acting person, and at the other end the person who knows nothing but his or her own ego identity. Selfish people know they are being selfish. True narcissists do not quite get it, that they are only focused on their own desires. Many people who are at the far self-centered pole of narcissism have become that way because of factors in their lives. Factors that have resulted in an inner world of pain. The waters directly around this little fish are polluted with rage, rejection, hopelessness, and despair. And this has often been the result of exactly these emotions bathing them as small children. In a wonderful but disturbing book written by the psychologist Alice Miller, The Drama of the Gifted Child, she outlines many of the features found in the development of the narcissistic person. One of these features was parents who wanted to create a perfect environment so that their child could succeed. However, these same parents were so focused on success that they never truly loved the child's soul. These are the parents who would take their children to the best resorts, and while they're there, put them in wonderful day camps, but never truly relating to the child. They would send the child to the best schools, but not know the depths of their hearts. I recall recently sitting in a cafe near Boston, overhearing a conversation. A man and a woman were speaking, with a young boy sitting across the table, as he related his experiences in second grade and discussing how he hoped third grade would be better. At first I thought, what a quite articulate young boy, telling what seemed to be his interested aunt and uncle his experiences at this elite boarding school, only then to realize that these were the boy's parents. They showed real interest in his progress, but they knew nothing of the boy's inner life. The result of such parenting is often outer world success, but an experience of inner relational rejection. No one ever touched their true life. And as an adult, no one, not even their own ego, touches that true life. They become a what rather than a who. The result being that right below the surface of consciousness, there is a reservoir of pain, rejection, hopelessness, despair, and of course rage. No wonder the fish closes its eyes. Who would want to see and feel that? Especially if you do not have to. And this is the problem with the narcissist. And with an overly technologically dominated society where success is determined by what you do rather than who you are. If you are successful in the outer life, you can effectively avoid this inner pain, at least for a time. But then you never get truly to live. This can be seen in the lives of two of the recent presidents of the United States, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. Whether you agree with their political stances or policies, what cannot be denied is that they have been very successful. One does not become President of the United States without some grand measure of success. However, both of them appear very narcissistic. Interestingly, both have somewhat similar childhoods. Both of their fathers were absent. Both created idealized father images. President Clinton's biographers point to his idealization of John F. Kennedy, making him a form of father substitute. President Obama created an idealized image of a father as presented in his autobiography, Dreams from My Father. However, both boys were groomed for outer political success while their hearts were neglected. Today, when forced to confront anything of the inner world, a confrontation that all of us face when others question our actions and motives, both respond with rage, rejection, and disbelief that others would so question them. These men are merely the tip of a societally sick iceberg created by valuing the what and how of people over the who. Jesus calls us to the who. First, know who you are with God. When you begin to know who you are with God, then begin to know who you are with others. To do this, we must value the who of God, the who of others, and the who of ourselves. If we thought the first portion of Jesus' teaching difficult, now we are walking upon really challenging fields. These fields are of self and other discovery. Jesus gives us a way to traverse it. It is walked, he tells us, with the courage of forgiveness. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive others their trespasses against us. This is how Jesus teaches us now to reach out to the world about us. When we are offended by someone, we almost always frame our anger with words such as, "What did you do?" or "How come you did that?" Our resentment and anger is often centered on the what and the how. To circumvent this, we are taught to ask the who question. Who is this that has done this? Such a question demands that we touch the other's soul and begin to know them. Answers to other questions of why something happened, what caused it to occur, how it transpired, all flow from this touching of souls. When souls touch, forgiveness has begun. Because forgiveness is actually the reestablishing of a broken relationship. Another interesting fact is that relationship with God and with others is not merely a privilege, but an expectation. That we would be in a full, loving relationship with God and with others is of such importance that it is framed in the terms of an essential obligation. It is what I owe God, what I owe others, and is reciprocally what is owed to me. The Greek word that is used to convey what is to be forgiven is ophelema, which, when the King James Version of the Bible was created, was best translated then as trespass. Today we probably relate to it better as a debt. And a debt is something that is owed, an obligation that is meant to be fulfilled. Jesus' teaching is teaching us that as we relate to God and to others, we must realize that all of us have an obligation. And even more disturbing, that each of us has and will continue to fail in fulfilling that obligation. Now, the comforting part is that God knows that we are not perfect enough to follow through and does not hold our feet to the fire of being perfect. The whole sanctification process is initiated and assisted by God because we cannot accomplish it alone. However, there is a catch. God wants us to be like Him in this regard, not holding others' feet to that fire either. Our plea is something like, I am not perfect. However, I will do my best. But when I fail, please do not hold it against me. I really do want to be in a full relationship with you, God. Jesus tells us that if we have this attitude, then failure is not held against us. God remains much more interested in the who of me, I am not perfect, than the what. All that we are asked is to also be more concerned with the who of those other imperfect persons in our lives, and not expect or demand flawlessness from them. If those that have hurt us desire to reestablish a real relationship, which is usually indicated by a sincere apology for a wrong, then it is to be accepted. Being in relationship with them is more important than having them fulfilling some transitory expectation or deed. The warning is clear. Make the soul of that other person more important than their accomplishments. If your opinion is that people should never offend you, never fail you, always meet their obligations to you, then not only will you be sorely disappointed and likely filled with resentment and rage, but God and your own conscience will use these standards in dealing with you. Judge not, lest you be judged, for the measure you use will be the measure used for you. This is not because God is vindictive and vengeful, but because it is a given of the unconscious that our outer attitude must be balanced by an equal inner attitude. An essential rule of nature is that of equilibrium. Also, in this case, the opinion fostered in such a case is one counter to relationship. How can a person be forgiven, recalling that forgiveness is the move towards restoration of a broken relationship, when the very attitude of unforgiveness is implicitly saying that a relationship is not desired? Unfortunately, God often gives us what we request. And if we request no relationship, we get no relationship. However, we thought we are only requesting no relationship with the offender. And what we realize is that by so doing, we have also requested no relationship with God. Jesus will expand on this. For further into the Gospel of Matthew, we find Peter asking Jesus about forgiveness. Jesus answered with a story. He said, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. And since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold, with his wife and children and all that they had, and payment be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, 'Have patience with me. I will pay you everything.' And out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. But when that same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. And seizing him, he began to choke him, saying, 'Pay what you owe.' So this fellow fell down and pleaded with him, 'Have patience with me, and I will pay you.' He refused, and went and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. When his master then summoned him and said, 'You wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. And should you not have had mercy on your fellow servant, as I had mercy on you?' And in his anger, his master delivered him to the jailers, until he should pay all his debt. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you, if you do not forgive your brother from your heart." It is one thing to say you should forgive, and it is another thing to do it. Again, Jesus knows very well that such a forgiving way of life is not natural to our present nature. That is why he makes it such a central part of our daily life and prayer. We need divine help in maintaining such an attitude. Each day we need to pray for forgiveness. Each day we need to remember to forgive. And each day we need to pray to remember. Remembering that the who of another person is more important than the what will daily orient us in the right attitude. However, there are just some people who just do not seem to appear worth forgiving. I get to know the who of them, and the who is pretty pitiful. Most people really would not like to have gotten to know the who of Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Pol Pot, Mao, Charles Manson, and the like. At least on the surface, these men do not have many a redeeming quality. Likewise, the child abused by a religious leader, the victim of incest, and any of us confronted by a pedophile have little ability and maybe less desire to forgive and be in a relationship with them. Of course, there are a number of reasons wanted to avoid them. However, we must struggle with the concept of forgiveness even here. At this point, a common misunderstanding about forgiveness stands in our way. This understanding may result and be the result of how we frequently respond to an apology. Someone says to us, "I'm sorry," and if we're being nice, we say, "That's okay." If forgiveness means negating the offense, then to forgive evil is extremely difficult. A better response than to say okay is possibly to say something like this: yes, you did hurt me. Maybe it was even evil. But if you truly wish to relate to me as a valued human being again, then I will not demand that you receive what you deserve. Hurt and evil is to be acknowledged. If the offender is truly sorry and repentant, they will accept that. And then, when we say we do not demand that they get what they deserve, this is the heart of forgiveness. If someone were to come to their priest and ask for absolution, the heart of repentance is summed up in a statement such as, I truly intend never to do it again. If they are deceiving themselves and others and truly do intend to do it again, then they are not seeking to heal a relationship, but probably only get over their own guilt. And therefore absolution is not given. Forgiveness is not vengefully withheld from them. It's just not possible to provide it. They are not truly seeking reconciliation then. But then there is that situation where the offender never says they're sorry. In such a state, true reconciliation between people may not be possible. However, the victim may still want to move toward the outlook Jesus is promoting. But without the other offender's participation, they find it nearly impossible. They also may find it impossible because there is a block which is in a self-protective fashion, us often taking on the triple role of judge, jury, and executioner. Many people unconsciously hold resentments because they find God to be much too lax. It is an interesting contradiction. These same people will often view God as being quite harsh with them, but then unconsciously hold resentment because they find God too forgiving of others. Then it is that well-meaning friends and counselors will tell this person that vengeance is the Lord's. Let God take care of the offender. Put down the triple role. However, secretly, the victim believes that God just might forgive the offender without inflicting a righteous measure of pain upon them. So the victim believes that they are the only ones on earth that can make sure the offender pays for their sins. The major problem with this is not merely that they are putting themselves in God's place, but that there is no power given to them to be judge, jury, and executioner. In the victim's mind and heart, the offender is guilty and now must pay. But the victim has no power by which to make them pay. So the victim merely wanders about carrying resentment in order to assure that the verdict is brought about and judgment brought to the offender, but the offender never realizes it. The pain is inflicted in only one direction, continuously toward the victim. This is typically also because the victim does not want to pay a further price by violating society's laws and commandments by taking that power to themselves. Because if they were to carry out the verdict, a verdict that often would mean harm to the offender, then they may pay society's and law's prices. Because vigilantes do not often end well. How are they trapped? No. For there is a method that is sometimes useful in releasing the pain. Instead of acting externally on the verdict, it is to begin internally to play through the executioner scenario. Imaginatively, let's take dealing with a pedophile as an example. The victim, even the vicarious victim of us hearing about such horror, must ponder what the perpetrator deserves. Ultimately, if it's a pedophile, they deserve a slow, painful death, and then being delivered directly to hell. Prior to that, think of how that slow, painful death should play out. Maybe castration first, with a dull knife. Now, many a victim may find some initial pleasure in imagining this, but then realize that you are the executioner. You must be the one to enact this scene. You must be the one to personally castrate the person, then slowly kill them. Imagining and watching the terror and agony that is upon them each step of the way. Now, at this point, most people will merely wish that someone else is carrying out this verdict. They do not want to inflict the horror themselves. But you are the victim. It is to you that the perpetrator owes their suffering and pain. Pain like the perpetrator inflicted upon you, the victim. Now, if you truly can carry this through, if there is still a glee about inflicting such suffering, that's when you need further to examine your own soul. For you, as so often is the case in this world of oppression and abuse, have now become the oppressor and the abuser. You have made another suffer in order to meet your own need. They made you suffer for their perverse sexual need. You have made them suffer for your need to exact revenge. You have merely become the very evil you are meaning to punish. Now, thankfully, most people will recoil at the thought of inflicting such true horror upon another person. When the dull knife is figuratively offered, they choose not to take it. This is forgiveness. The perpetrator owes the victim pain. They owe the victim their life. However, the victim chooses not to inflict that pain and take that life. They have said no to the debt. The debt needs not be repaid. The offender has been forgiven. The victim has forgiven. Such forgiveness does not imply that something was okay. In this situation, it does not imply that the offender is not to be remembered and is no longer remembered of the offense. It merely means that the who is now recognized more than the what. The pedophile is still recognized for who they are. An imperfect human being, one still made in the image of God, but also one who has a severe psychopathology that is still dominating their psyche. I may not castrate them, I may not kill them, but I still will not allow them to be alone with a child. Recognizing the who is not some idealized philosophy. It is seeing the person for who they totally are, the good as well as the bad. If they are ever to be healed, it is only by their own recognition of this as well. And the power that brings this is a full relationship. but the person must recognize their own badness and goodness and work on it. This is the healing power of forgiveness, the power that brings each of us into a full relationship with God and with each other. In many ways, hell is defined and populated by those who want neither God nor others, and so they get what they want. Jesus presents the way of heaven, the way of forgiveness, the way of reconciliation, the way of deep, hearty relationship.